How can Australia and the UK design denser cities with better public spaces that truly work for people? I'm Belinda Coates, and this is The Connector. Today on The Connector, as Australia grows and the UK builds on centuries of city making, there isn't a better time to have the conversation about density, public space, and what it really means to make cities better for people. And I'm really delighted today to be joined by Australian architect and author David Holm, whose passion inspired him to travel to 500 cities and led to his first book. And it's not just any book, David, it's an incredible book. It's called Drawing the City, and it shows over 500 urban spaces worldwide. And what are the key ingredients that make cities work in places like Sydney, London or Shanghai from your experience visiting all of those cities?
Belinda, hello, thank you. It's lovely to join you. I think that the key ingredient for me, and I guess one of the things that I'm focused about, is the provision of public places. So, when I go travelling to a city, what I always find myself doing is actually looking to find the great public places that exist in cities.
I think we all do that, don't we? We look for the public spaces. What are you looking for when you're looking for the public spaces?
It is interesting because there's a number of different things. I'm often thinking about climate and the sort of conditions, the weather conditions, and a lot of the stuff that I've done has been to view cities in colder climates. So you're often tracking the sun and trying, in my case, because I'm often drawing, you're trying to find somewhere that's actually a really nice place to draw, looking where the sun is, how the sun moves across a space.
That's
and what's instructive.
Fascinating, isn't it? That you are following the sun. And you call cities humanity's greatest invention. Australia is still growing, and the UK has centuries of city making experience. What is each getting right, do you think, and what can we learn from each other?
I think what cities that are great cities get right is that sense of community, if we can. So it's moving away from things like the motor car, great invention out of the 20th century for sure, but the impact that it had on humanity and the way that we live in cities was profound, often in the negative. So the more we walk, the more we take time and spend in places, I think that's the better sort of a city that we can live in. And strangely enough, that's quite aligned with being in a community sense as well.
I think you touch on there when we take time. And what's really beautiful about the drawing experience and sketching is that you do have to stop and really take in the environment. And how is that changing now with AI and architects in today's age using digital rather than the traditional method of drawing?
Look, I think we're in a period of evolution. Humanity's always been in a period of evolution, from the first sort of cave drawing. So this is just one more, is my view. When I teach students, what I often teach them to do is to go and draw, and it can be with whatever tools. They might paint as well too. But it's the idea of actually standing in a place and actually looking at it and appreciating it for what it is. It might be the scent, it might be the colour, it might be the sort of different seasonal attitudes as well. But recording that is the important part.
What have you really acknowledged by taking time when you've been in one of these 500 places? What have you seen that others might not have noticed?
Oh, I think you see detail. There's also funny things as well. Funny things happen to you when you're standing and drawing in sort of public places. People come up to you and ask you all sorts of funny questions about, I've had people ask me to mind their dogs while they run errands and things like that as well too. So there's all sorts of funny little activities. Some people are worried that I've been giving them a parking ticket. The idea is you're standing around and you look at details and you see things that, in this Instagram age where we want to take quick photos and post them, sometimes you don't do that when you take that quick photo. So
no, that's so true. That's so true, yes. And density is a big theme on The Connector. With the push for city living, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions about density, and how should Australia and the UK think about it differently?
Yeah, it's interesting. Density is often seen in the negative, and I had the great fortune to meet a great Indian architect, Charles Correa, before he passed away. And he sort of said, I don't get this debate about density. Cities should be places that attract people from all over the world so they can come and fulfill their hopes and dreams and their loves and their cherishes. So he was saying, bring on density. What I would say is, you can have the density, but what you need to have are the public amenities as well to that. In my case, it's a public place and public space. But you need to basically have the, if you like, compact dwelling units and density, but also the great places that we can gather in.
Well, you've drawn iconic spaces like Trafalgar Square, Piazza Navona, Central Park and Martin Place. What makes a public space truly iconic, rather than just empty space between buildings?
It is interesting. I think there's a combination of aspects. We talked about the weather, before. The weather is important and how some of those spaces can accept and almost hold the weather as a weather container.
Are you only saying that because I'm from Melbourne?
And I'm from Sydney. It is also the materials as well. Often some of the great public places are made of very, very few materials. So there's a real simplicity that exists. And I think that helps also from a social point of view, because people can come and interpret the places, given their own personalities, well, for different events, for different functions at different times of the day.
Many of the discussions on the connector have focused on global competitiveness and city identity, and let's not talk about the weather. But from your travels, which cities are most prepared for the future, do you think?
Oh, okay. So some favourites, I think places like Vancouver and maybe Copenhagen. And if you
Copenhagen
look at
is definitely in my top 5.
It's top 5. What they've done is to, if you like, soften the effects of big public transport and ensure that that happens at a quieter scale. So again, back to that walkability, maybe bike riding, but the community is really the key in all of these. So they feel like great places to live. They may well be good for industry and business as well, but there's sort of a sense of a feeling there that it's a quality place to, do your business, raise your family, etc.
Let's talk more about Copenhagen, because it is one of my favourite places. Is there a magic there? Do you believe there's a magic there that you might have witnessed in drawing the city?
I think one of the magic situations that occurs perhaps through Europe is you don't necessarily have to have higher rise buildings to achieve density. If you think, Paris, for example, with their sort of the Haussmann situation, 8-9 stories, which is really, quite compact. That's one of the densest parts of Europe, and Copenhagen has that as well. So it doesn't have to be a high-rise city to be dense. You can actually have that density in what is quite a squat and compact form that, again, can be walkable in the vertical as well too.
Would 8 or 9 stories be an ideal height, do you believe?
A lot of the work that we're seeing, say, in Australia is a bit less than that, but 8 or 9 stories is quite good because you get a sense of, coordination with trees, with streetscape, with the heights of buildings. You still get to see the sunlight. Shadow doesn't become a big effect. So I think, something like sweet spot between, say, 6 to 9 stories is really quite an interesting model to work on in the creation of cities.
Well, you've certainly got the experience having visited so many cities. Your work on infrastructure and airports and metro systems also shapes how people move around cities. And how can Australia and the UK design infrastructure that also creates great public spaces, not just transport efficiency? And what are your best examples?
So one of my favourites is Grand Central Station in New York, and it's that classic sort of space that's there. It's the busiest railway station still in North America. And what happens is people sort of say, well, I'll meet you under the clock. So there's those really simple messages of society that occur. And that really is about the creation of a lovely space with the light coming into it. It's a bit beyond the brief, is what we often say, and it's happening already around the world, is that great transport places, often, there might well be a railway station or an airport, but the glue, the sticky stuff, is actually the space that's often beyond the brief. So in our work, what we try and do is to actually incorporate that public place into the design that we do. Now, that might be an extension of the street, or it might be a great hall, like the example in New York. But that's that idea of having some iconic forms that you can say, let's meet under the clock, or let's meet next to the orange banner or something.
It's very romantic, but it is a beautiful thing that really does connect us in different cities. And you highlight continuity, diversity and social equity as the keys to thriving cities also. Which of these do you think are at most risk today, and how should governments respond?
I think equity is really important, and I use the word sort of egalitarian. Is that one of my observations, especially in the European model of, say, piazzas, is that you see places change. The Campo de Fiore in Rome is a really great example. So it's a flower market in the morning and transitions through restaurants through to nightclubs at night time.
Amazing.
I always think that space behave well because there's lots of eyes on the space. So you're not going to go in there because and behave in a way that's less than expected. It's well lit, it's well surveilled, and so therefore people go in there and they respect it. They keep it quite clean, and so you get this sort of and safe. Safety is really important.
I love that. In a digital world, you still draw cities by hand, which I just think is so beautiful. And what can hand drawing really show planners and policymakers that technology just cannot do?
Oh, that's interesting, because within our studio that I work in, we use my hand drawings and others to then transition it across into electronic drawings as well. So it is, if you like, a whole of life exercise. Often when I draw, it'll be a little bit exaggerated for what the truth is, and that's sort of part of the idea of drawing, because you're trying to make a point. It's a little bit like talking, where you might have a pause, where you might raise or lower your voice. It's another language as well too. So we find that in drawing, you can often achieve that expression perhaps far greater than a line drawing. A line drawing really is about getting something built, whereas the sort of, if you like, the more emotive drawing
beautiful.
Is emotion. Mm.
Yeah, it's really powerful, and I really hope that you can inspire more of our future architects to continue to use hand drawing. I really want to ask you a more important question now. You've visited 500 cities. What is your favourite city? That's my first question.
Oh, first question. So I think there's quite a few, and they're different seasons as well too. You know, I've had wonderful experiences in places like Venice in winter, you know,
Yep.
and you wouldn't sort of think of that sort of
You
thing.
love the weather, don't
You know,
you?
so I love the weather because it actually changes the way you feel and the way that you sort of, I guess, engage with the place as well too. So you know, I think there's different environments that are important in cities.
So let's go with Venice. And then my final question to you before we wrap up is, you must have some pretty cool flyer miles. What's your status?
Status is good, you know, so it's always good to fly around kind of thing. But again, what I often do is I might do a trip, but then a lot of it's in walking. So I might go on like walking villages.
Oh, I love that. I love it.
We were privileged to go to the Venice Biennale this year, but spent a lot of time walking across northern Italy in small villages, sort of. So I think there's almost a shoe leather, you know, frequent flyer point system as well too that should be counted as well.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Let's embrace the art of drawing and taking the moments and the time to walk the cities. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you, Belinda.
That's the program for today. This program has been brought to you by Harper B, and this is Ticker, and we'll be right back.